Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining Rejuvi 45. Our guess is that if you're here today, you're here because you've heard a phrase called modernized leadership or modern leadership, and you're intrigued. And this is the community with a commitment, a deep commitment to building that capability in every leader throughout our benches and in every organization across the globe. So thank you for being here. My name is Regina Hepp, and I am with Rejuvi. And today I'm joined by
Sabrina Gilman. So happy to be here.
Sabrina. It's so lovely to have you here today. And before we get going on our topic, which is liftoff, I think it's worth a couple of minutes to talk about how we were introduced to one another, because I kind of would have to say that it was a skateboard sticker that actually brought us together, and we have fantastic conversations about modern leadership. So how did all this go down?
Yeah, what a happy accident is how I'd have to put it, but also a great example of, you get the right people in the right room and amazing things happen. And that room happened to be an airport lounge several months ago. My husband, who I was traveling with, is a skateboarder and has skateboard stickers on his luggage. And it just so happened that a couple of individuals spotted it and recognized a sticker and wondered if we had someone in common. We did. We started talking, and one of those two individuals who were headed somewhere totally different than my husband and I was your colleague and a Rejuvi colleague, Charlie.
Yeah,
And
Charlie Toby.
almost immediately we got into a conversation of, well, who are you? Where are you going? At the time, my husband and I were living in Switzerland, where I had a global role for my organization, leading a team of people across the continent. And that ended up just leading really organically to a conversation around the topic of modern leadership unintentionally. And I was so thankful that coming out of that, there was an opportunity to further connect with you and the group. And I do feel like we've had so many really meaningful conversations, and you've inspired me in many ways for a lot of the situations that I've been dealing with through transformation and work with different teams over the last 6-9 months.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think this really is a small world when you take the time to notice little things, and sometimes those little things are skateboard stickers.
Yeah.
But there hasn't been a moment where I think you and I have had opportunity, and all these opportunities that we've had to connect, where we haven't just found little moments and we're off and racing. And I think that one of the phrases that started to come up in our planning session for today was a phrase called kind of "what more can I do?" I think that one of the things I've noticed in you as a leader, and I feel like it's been alive in me as well, is this thing called "what more can I do?" And it makes people have wonderful conversations. And what more can I do is so connected to our topic today, which is called liftoff. So for those of you who are joining our call live, for those of you who are watching our recordings or watching slices of this on our Rejuvi social media sites, you know that we bring volumes of Rejuvi 45 to you. And each of these volumes are broken into mixes. And we have different mixes helping organizations to think about doing different things that are important to them to be this growth-oriented, sustainable organization. And this particular mix is all about organizations really needing to pay attention to the new model of leadership, the modernized model of leadership, which is you have to recognize that the growth model of human capital, being compassionate human leaders, is so highly related to the growth model of the business. And you can produce leaders who are compassionate human leaders and fierce business leaders at the same time. And this particular, so we've had lots of fun sessions, possibilities at the ready, blip the throttle and downshift, just jump. And so the topic that Sabrina and I are covering today is really about lift off. And Sabrina, this whole thing about what more can I do? I'm kind of getting like goosebumps now, like goosies, because I fundamentally believe that all leaders want to be better. All leaders literally want to find a way to lift off. They're just looking for a modern way to do it, or like the sequential way to do it, or the way to do it. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that that's that positive intention that you can read into everything that everybody's doing, but we're all being pulled in so many directions. Everything is moving faster. Expectations, I think, have never been higher of leaders and organizations. And so I think you're exactly right. Sometimes it's just being able to visualize and with steady confidence, process oriented, have the sequential steps of what is it going to take to lift off and lift off with my team.
Mhm. Yeah, I want to talk about this phrase that you just use. What's it going to take to lift off? And when you look in your rear view mirror, you have some amazing experiences and stories to share. Well, not only I think influence what's in your front runway, but need to be talked about because I think that they can be so helpful to other leaders. But Sabrina, tell us a little bit about your experience and kind of your lessons learned as you have lifted off as a leader, and as you've done that, tried to do that with your team and the business.
Yeah, thank you. It's such a great question, and it's nice to reflect on sort of steps taken and opportunities seized, but also opportunities missed, right? I think it's really important as a grounding to say that there's no perfect way to do this, but I think authentically trying to continuously improve and doing that transparently and admitting when you've made mistakes to a team is first and foremost the best way to build credibility and trust. Because when you're asking someone to lift off, you're inherently asking them to change and transform. And that's scary, right? That is a violent disruption of somebody's day-to-day in some way. And so the approach that I've certainly tried to take with my teams at a time of transformation, at a time when we're bringing in my organization different groups together, while simultaneously asking those combined groups to be restructured, to totally take a new approach and a new organizational structure that mimics and reflects the portfolio of the business that we support. To do those two things at once, I think you first have to have a clear vision, and you have to communicate that and communicate it over and over again, because that transparency allows people to feel a little bit less anxiety, still anxiety, but less anxiety as you tell them, this is what it looks like. This is how we're going to be on the runway. And this is what it looks like when we lift off and lift off together. I think if you do not have that clarity for yourself as a leader to be able to communicate about what it's going to look like in the interim, and then what your goals are together, that you're going to leave people behind, unfortunately, or face a lot more resistance than you would otherwise. And relatedly, I think that as you're building out that vision, as I know you and I have discussed, really taking a hard look at the structure of your organization and looking at how you provide services or support or do whatever it is that your function is responsible for in that organization might require dramatic changes. It should be a modern reflection of whatever the business goals and strategic needs of the organization are. And I think that sometimes we shy away from changing the structure and we try to change individual people or activities because it's hard. And I think that taking that time to meaningfully look at what the goals, short, mid, long term of your business are, and then saying, let's take the heavy lift together to make sure we're the right people doing the right work, is really, really helpful, because I think that that then translates, at least in my experience, into something that is personal for people. And I love when we talk about the importances of right now for leaders taking that people-centric, compassionate approach And when you look at and you create a structure and you transparently communicate it to people, I think that they can see their day-to-day work and their roles, and they can see it reflected in the goals of the organization. They know what the purpose of the organization is and how they intimately fit into that. And that really unlocks, I think, for people an energy and excitement, the opposite of what we might feel associated with dread and anxiety in a time of
That,
change. Yeah,
that normal change process. You're right.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm. So did I interrupt you, Sabrina?
No, no, it was great. I mean, it was great.
Okay.
I'm glad,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you were agreeing. I think that those are, for me, those are the key foundational points. The only other thing I know that is a lesson learned is that you cannot overdo, as a leader, attempts to make it inclusive along the way. Because I think that when you are including people, and you have to get creative in the ways that you think people need to be included, because you have loud voices and you have the people you rely on, but you need to go to those who are quiet because they contribute for sure in a meaningful way, and they may have a unique lived experience. So I think it's about trying to go meet people where they are in a process of transformation and make sure that you're not missing something, because it will inform the decisions that you make for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think that's the mix I've taken and found successful.
Yeah. Here we go. So thankful for a skateboard sticker. One of the things, so if I had to summarize what you were saying, I noticed that you first started out with your experience and your lessons learned were really about you. This need to be, you use the word authentic, to be open, to be honest about mistakes. So it's the first thing that you're opening up with is kind of how you choose to be as a leader as you are leading others through this process. And then you went into some specific things that are productive, helpful for people. Number one, starting with vision. Number two, really aggressively using structure and getting conversations going about that. And then number three, which is never being afraid to overdo communication, being inclusive, right? Making sure that people have skin in the game. And what I want to do is I just want to point out that with this is the reason I think that why we've connected and why I feel so hopeful about and bullish about the future is that really strong leaders understand the difference between you can be a compassionate human leader and you can be a fierce business leader at the same time. And that's exactly how you open this question without, this is not a, while we planned our general questions for today, your response is not canned, right? So here you are talking about how you need to be as this authentic, compassionate human leader. You also understand the business's practices that you have to be leveraging in order to run that business in an inclusive way. Boom, right there. That's modernized leadership.
Yeah, well, thank you. And that's, I mean, I know that that resonated so much the first time we started to talk about it. It's before I had the words to verbalize that concept. And I have found, and I'm so thankful that you're out there also reiterating this. It's that they are not mutually exclusive. I think that they are so interrelated. Having the compassionate people obsessed side is what is going to be that unlock. It's
Yep.
it's a lever that you can and you should pull, and not only because it yields incredible results. It makes you a fierce business person, and with results that you'll be able to point to, data driven goals achieved. But I think that more importantly, you feel better and more excited and more invested doing it, because we're all people, right? You're getting something out of it as you're building those deeper relationships and just trying to step into people's shoes.
Agreed. One of the things I want to, as you are talking about the things that from your experience and lessons learned have been have helped you to lift off, and you've talked about vision, structure, and never being afraid to overdo communications and being inclusive. One of the things that's come up in prior conversations with you is the importance of allowing people to bring their own experience And I want you to just talk a little bit about that because you have had some really challenging, exciting stuff. I think sometimes I think the best opportunities that come to you are both hard and soft, right? They're both exciting. They're both exciting and scary. I think that they teach us the most. But when you are at the end of wrapping up one of those, they're the things that bring you such great fulfillment. But one of the things I've noticed about you is that you seem to intuitively understand as you're working through vision structure and communication, the need to make sure that you give people a voice around the experiences and knowledge that they have. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that ties back to when I was initially saying that you build credibility, you build trust with people when you acknowledge that you don't know everything. And there was certainly a time I can think to earlier in my career, early as a leader, when I made assumptions that I shouldn't have based on my experience. And while that is important and we each have those, it was when I started to incorporate other people's perspectives and especially living abroad and thinking about things in a much more global way that I learned that I'll never know everything. And that was almost for itself a relief. And I think it has really helped expedite my ability to be ideally a strong leader to others. Because once I acknowledged that, it put me into listening mode, being present and listening. Because it is with the inputs of individuals who you need to rely on. It is sometimes the most quiet person on your team who is an observer and who is aware of all of the things that are written and unwritten, and who, if given the platform, will tell you something that is so impactful, not only for you potentially as a leader, but for your whole organization, because you can go out and use your voice and your platform to scale whatever that great idea or that perspective is. And because things move so fast right now, and because everything is on demand and you can get an answer, and that's the expectation that we put on one another, I think that it more than ever leaves us vulnerable to missing out on those perspectives. And I think that without them, we're always not only like you and I talk about leaving people behind and not getting the buy-in and the excitement that's going to drive an overall team approach, but I think that you just serve your business less positively. Your impact is less significant.
Mhm. Having your voice heard is not overrated.
No,
It
no, that's
is
like
just,
the human thing amongst us is no matter how loud you may be, we each come from such a rich place of experiences. And to not have those shared at the table to me is we talk about diversity, inclusion as a part of modern leadership, I think, of course. But my experience has been that when we don't focus obsessively on that inclusive side, that you're leaving voices at the table silent. And this is such a miss.
it's such a mess. I know I've noticed you talking about the importance of gaining everyone's perspective, of listening to everyone's ideas, of making sure that you create this space. I think you've even used the phrase holding space for where people are at. And I can't stress the importance of that inside of this process of how any organization transforms from, here to here. The other thing that in your responding to this notion of um, having one's voice heard is not overrated, is you talking about sometimes voices are big and bold, and sometimes voices are soft and whisper.
Mhm.
And you have to ensure that all of those voices, no matter how big and bold or how soft and whisperish, you have to find a way to kind of get them to the table. Because if you don't, you're just not creating any skin in the game, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's like literally no skin in the game for someone whose voice hasn't been acknowledged,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that is that piece of engagement that you either get and you can retain and you can grow, or you don't. And where people don't feel like they have a voice, then I can't fault them for not feeling
Right,
excited by, even if
right,
it's the coolest company doing the coolest work, if you personally
right.
come in and you do not feel seen or heard, it's very easy to become disengaged. And I genuinely believe that that piece around holding the space, making the room for people to give their perspective, unfortunately gets conflated with the idea that everybody has a vote. And as a business leader, that can be really scary because you say, well, we all disagree. We're coming in with different perspectives. We'll be paralyzed by having to go out and get this consensus. But I think that that's what we need to remind people, is that making space for people to have an opinion and share it is great. That's psychological safety. It's different than being able to be decisive. And the two together, that's success, because you had people who got to air grievances or give you their opinion, but also then, authentically hear them, provide feedback, which they can take, and then you move together, but you're moving together and they know that you came to them and gave them the platform that they probably really desired.
Mhm. We're going to transition into kind of our second chunk of today's program and get you talking about the kinds of things that you have found most helpful, as a leader, as you are helping your unit to get from here to here. But I'm going to answer the question first for you, because it's just like you just gave me such a good idea that I just have noticed in over my career, my career is decades long. I really am in my fourth decade of contributions to human capital development and to organization development. And so, we have this question that we want to banter about today, which is, throughout any transformation, you are a leader and you're trying to influence where you're at today, your current state, into kind of your vision. But what are the things that are helpful? And when you talk about the difference between, for example, everybody has a vote, right? And I think the actual synthesis that a leader has to take responsibility for, from listening to the ideas and perspectives and the voices that are there, is one of the most helpful skills that a leader can have. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I think that it's also a little bit scary, because as a leader, you have to create these skin in the game moments if you want to have a really rockin' and rollin', aligned and engaged unit. That's just the way that it is.
yeah,
And in order to do it, you need to ensure that every voice, right, is taken into account. But that's so different than everybody has a vote.
great.
So it means that as a leader, you're continually synthesizing what you're hearing. You're continually negotiating around what you're taking in, and what's coming out is in the form of the direction that the team chooses to take and the decisions that they're going to be making every step along the way to make it happen. I think if we could teach leaders that fundamental skill set, in my experience, it's one of the most helpful things that you can do to get through the hardest part of leadership, which is, once you start listening to those voices to start to create that alignment engagement, you're going to have skill sets and a process for synthesizing it, right? To
Yeah,
figure out how to get formulated into meaningful directions and decisions that create action and progress.
yeah, I totally agree. And I think that it's one of those things that's very hard. And I'm not trying to make it sound easy. But it's a muscle like anything else that you
Oh
have to
yeah.
exercising. I have to do it myself. But I find that once you observe for it, and as a leader, you're aware of it and you're incorporating it just into the way that you go out and you are directionally managing a team, the acceleration that comes with that for a team is incredible, because as you learn the team, you can start to, ahead of time, not have to wait and observe and react for signs of
Yes.
anxiety or failure, but you understand in a really unique way, unlike someone else who's not responsible for a team, what are likely to be the pain points. And you might in advance be able to go out and provide reassurances, and how nice, to the extent ever possible, that you can reduce friction points, because our lives are full of them. And so when you're out there clearing the roadblocks while also moving the group forward, it's amazing. But it only comes through that initial uncomfortable action of making time and being present. I also try to remind myself of that all the time. It's very easy in today's world of emails and phones and a million people pinging you. While we've been on this great conversation, I'm getting pinged, but I'm ignoring them, right? Because I'm here with you and we're having a conversation. Taking the time to do just that is probably the first step, because it gives you a chance as a leader and a colleague to internalize what somebody is telling you.
Yeah. And another thing that has come up in our conversations, and this is all in this kind of umbrella of the things that can be helpful to any leader who is trying to, be this authentic, compassionate, caring human leader at the same time that they are trying to fiercely run their business, right? So what are the things that are helpful? So, we know there's this ability to synthesize information and that can inform the direction and decision of the team or the unit or the business. Another idea that has come up in our conversations is, I'll use a word called integration. But this is, I think that one of the things I see leaders struggling with the most is, right now there's a lot of noise around purpose-centered work. And so when you first hear this thing called purpose-centered work, I'm not going to the work of the organization, right? I'm not going to its vision, mission, and values. When I think about purpose-centered work, I start to think about we're living in a time where people are starting to become more self-actualized around what's important to them as people. So, Sabrina, talk to us a little bit about your experience in uncovering what's important to people and how you start to integrate that into the work of the organization.
Yeah, I think that it's an up and down conversation. The first piece is, like we talked about, in seeking feedback, it doesn't always need to be with a team seeking feedback on a specific proposed change. Sometimes it's starting with exactly that. What do you care about? And I think finding people's personal values and asking them to go through the same difficult self-internal review that we're describing. If I think of myself as a leader, that doesn't happen overnight. I have to self-identify those values and work on them and lead with them. And everybody has that. And they're sort of North Stars is also part of the way that I try to talk about it with my own team.
We too. We use the word North Star a lot.
I think it's visual. It's something people can relate to. And the key is it could be anything. It doesn't need to be something that's a buzzword for work. It's just, what are the things that are driving you every day? And depending on what people respond with and in what order, it gives me a really good idea of their boundaries. And I know, sort of where they're wanting to play and also what they're hoping to achieve immediately and maybe long-term in their careers. And so it's that in the background that then feeds a way to take organizational goals. So not, like you're saying, not the mission and values of the organization, but strategically, what are we trying to achieve? What is critical for the success of this organization? How are we going to grow? Ideally, we're going to take those, and as a leader, I'm going to work to translate those into actions that as a department, and then even more finally as an individual, that people can go and hold themselves accountable. And that means, I think, no matter what your role in an organization is and what your function is, it means in today's world, coming up with KPI-driven, data-driven goals that give you that purpose, and they're in the boundaries, right? It's what I'm coming here to do. It's what I'm trained to do, or this is my role. And I see that for the next 12 months, I or this group are going to be responsible for X activity. And I see, if I look up to speak to the most senior leaders of this company, that I'm helping this portion of our strategic vision to be realized. And I think that it just adds this level of nuance and energy for people that is purpose at work. It doesn't always need to be people's primary purpose, but you need to feel that sense of ownership
Mhm.
to come in probably and give the level of energy that we'd all like to every day.
Mhm. I haven't found too many experiences as a leader where if you just take the time to get to know an individual's North Star, just take the time to get to know what their North Star is. If you take that time, my experience is that it is not that hard to figure out how to correct a direct link between what's important to them and what's important or what needs to get done in the organization, right?
Yeah,
It's just you have to take that time to talk about what's important to the people. Because once you understand that, it's like going to, it's like going to a bakery, right? So you probably don't know about this, maybe you do this, but I love to bake. So I'm an excellent baker. So when we're together, you're going to tell me what you love, and then I'm going to say, if you say chocolate chip cookies, I'm going to say, okay, okay, what kind of chocolate is it going to be? 62 or 72 or so I love to bake. And so for me, thinking about taking the time to ask people what their North Star is like going to the bakery,
yeah,
because you're going to find out all the possibilities of chocolate chip cookies, or all the types of possibilities that exist. And now, as a leader, you get to say, we can actually take this, right? We can take this, all of these great baked goods, and we can start to plug it into the right places of the organization. You just have to take the time to ask.
yeah. Yeah, you have to take the time to ask, hear it, and then that step, the next step that's not easy, but like you're describing, the math is there as you connect the dots. I think we work sometimes in the effort to be fast.
Mhm.
We manufacture purpose for people, thinking we understand what they're doing
Yeah,
based on history with the
yeah,
company or whatever. But that's totally different than what we're describing, which is look broader and try to reveal if there was some
yeah,
untapped portion of what this
yeah.
person can do that's going to be such a win-win.
Yeah, I like this phrase, manufactured purpose, which I do think that, for if you are a leader, if and your approach is to take the purpose of the organization, right? And then to say, okay, let's get excited about the purpose of the organization. That's manufactured human purpose.
Yep.
Because really what you have to do is start to figure out, wait a minute, you've got to ask the question, what is your North Star? And then how can we integrate it into the North Star of the organization? And this concept of where I'm using the word called integration is actually some of the work of Douglas McGregor, one of the great management researchers in the past century. And he wrote this book in the 50s called The Human Side of Enterprise. In the 50s. And I know I was actually going to bring it down for today's session. If I tilt my camera a little bit there, you're going to see the book, you're going to see the book right there. There's my husband all those years ago. But that book has meant something to me. And when a book means something to me, I will write my name in, in what do you call it when you open the book, kind of the cover right there. I'll write my name right there and the year that I read it. And this would say 1981. And that was the 25th anniversary of the printing of that book. So these concepts have been around. We haven't really, I think, meaningfully been able to build them in a consistent way inside of most of our organizations. And that's why I think we still struggle for these moments where we can say, yeah, our organization is growing sustainably
Yeah.
because we have integrated both the North Star of the human and the North Star of the organization, right? Which is really the very concept of modern leadership.
Yeah. And I think that there are ways that you can exhibit that allow people to be vulnerable. We're talking about something that is it's
Yeah.
based on vulnerability. And so my my why, my purpose. I've been with my organization for 15 years. And the reason that I have is very unique to me. It obviously reflects and should to
Mhm.
anybody that I believe in the work that we're doing, or different aspects of the organization and the people, but it's unique to me. But me sharing that with individuals gives them room to acknowledge that they might have a different why, and so we can find their North Star and make sure that they feel like when they're coming in, they're getting the same value that I am. And I think that's really exponential for
Mhm.
people.
Mhm. Um, this is Rejuvi's third season, and so what that means is this topic of lift off. This is the third time we've done it. We have one more session next week called The Catalyst, and that'll wrap up season 3, and we're headed into season 4. And so what does that mean? That means next September we'll be doing the fourth session of lift off. But when I start to look at our notes and the recordings and the reels from season 2, we had a couple of engineers talking about this topic called liftoff. And very exciting as well, just as ours is today. But one of the things, and I need to get my notes out because this was engineering talk. This was physics talk, and
I'm not
so
an engineer. For those who are joining us, I am not. I'm not an engineer,
yes,
but I
I
love
have to, I have
engineering.
to, I have to kind of get my notes. But one of the interesting parts that they brought up, and I'm going to actually relate it to I think some of the things that you and I are talking about. But they talked about modern leadership and they in terms of liftoff, and they related it to an airplane, and they related it to these concepts of an airplane actually lifting off, and these four things that are continually tugging and warring with each other, that have to have different relationships in order for the plane to not only take off but to fly and then to land. And they are things like weight, which is like the force of gravity, lift, which is the force created when there are differences in air pressure, thrust, and drag, right? And so, for example, for a plane, and by the way, I am using my notes here because this is not my territory, but for an airplane to achieve liftoff, the thrust has to be greater than the drag, and the lift has to be greater than the weight. But guess what? There's a whole new set of relationships when the plane needs to remain in flight. For example, now the thrust has to equal the drag and the lift has to equal the weight. So I'm looking at these notes from these engineers and I'm reflecting on our conversation, about, and let me get my notes out kind of from you, what you're learning to be around being authentic, how you choose to show up and to be this caring, compassionate human leader while you are running a top-notch, fierce business function for your organization. And I'm going, wow, all these things are here in the way that we talk about it. So for example, there is thrust, right? And so thrust comes from our ability to start to think about vision, right? And starts to think about structure, and I looked at these words, and the one that we really didn't get to yet is lift. And for me, lift is about hope.
Yeah.
And whenever I'm with you, I always feel hopeful. And so, so I'm thinking, Sabrina, why do you have so much hope in the idea of modern leadership? And why does it make you so bullish for the future?
Yeah, thank you. I got goosebumps thinking about it because it's kind of such a great question because it's highly visual for me and I'm picturing it. And I think that one thing you and I have discussed in the past is as you're going through a transformation and as you're focused on lift, you're ideally acknowledging that this is change is hard and that people are anxious and all of the things that we've discussed. But that throughout the process, if you're laying out vision, you're planting seeds of what will grow into something that's supposed to be great and it's supposed to materially change people's lives for the better. It's supposed to create better career opportunities and talent development and things that will live on beyond the hardship of an immediate transformation. And so, in addition to just having a fierce belief that that will work out, what's been so exciting for me recently with this team that I believe fully in and has really partnered with me to go through a really significant transformation has been the experience of individuals who were suspicious, who were worried, who were dissatisfied, who didn't feel connected to work. You know, these are all different people that are flashing into my mind. And it's the one-on-one or group interactions that I have had very recently where those people's opinion is changing. It's changing not only about the organization and the possibility of how they can provide support, but it's for them as individuals an excitement, a genuine excitement and happiness about what is next.
Yeah.
And, you know, just that I want to jump in, and how exciting in today's world that you can have that feeling. We all want to have that feeling. And so seeing each of those proof points of the interactions and the response and the joy, you know, just a shared experience of joy with a member of your team, especially if that comes as a result of change that is going to positively impact them and their family's life, it makes all of the difficulty so
I,
worth it.
I know. And for me, I think that hope and joy can wane at right.
Yeah.
Right, it can wane. And of course, you know, there's always going to be, you know, the kind of the ups and the downs. But one of the things that you mentioned as you were talking about the things most helpful to you as a leader as you transition from here to here, but also now as you talk about why you are so hopeful as we think about the future. And one way you talked about it being, you know, understanding how to be KPI driven, and now you're talking about proof points. And who would have thunk, right? Who would have thunk that when you use these words like hope and joy, that these other words like KPIs, proof points, or understanding action and progress actually fuel hope and joy. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so to me, that is why for me, I am so bullish on the future and I'm so bullish on modern leadership because one of the pieces of it, as we think about lifting off, the important dynamics in lifting off, weight, lift, thrust, and drag, the lift is having a measured understanding of how your leadership capability is changing, right?
Yeah.
Because when you understand that, you know, it's like measuring hope and joy. That's a good thing because when you understand that, you understand how it starts to inform empirically the KPIs that need to be met inside of your organization, right? That need to meet the stakeholders, the customers, you know, that are waiting for their pains to be solved and their gains to be served, right? I just feel like hope and joy are so connected to our ability to understand in a measured way how we're growing and changing as leaders and how they inform these things that are important for human growth and for business growth. That's lifting off.
Yeah. I agree. And it's that lived experience on a team is incredible. And it's something that you feel like you want to chase. And I think that's great. That should be that, you know, in today's world, when you think about goals, when you think about business results, we think constantly about continuous improvement, but it's the same thing on a team and it's the same thing for a leader. You need to always, I think, have a little bit of a foot on the gas for both, because as things evolve, you're right, hope and joy can wane from moment to moment, but creating a structure and an environment with feedback loops
That's right.
and the proof points of here are the net results of us doing this together, that leads you to being able to keep going through that
Yeah.
process and keep you know, winning as a team.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. There's another one. It's not just KPI being KPI driven proof points, but feedback loops is another really important concept. Sabrina, I am grateful for a simple skateboard sticker.
Me too. more than I previously had been, and I will definitely give that feedback to my husband.
Yes,
Well,
and
yeah,
so it brought you into my life. It brought you into Rejuvi's life, and I think it's just been so fun to not only learn about your background and share with you some of our perspective, but to have someone that is just out there being a modern leader with for their business, for themselves, for their team, for their business every single day, because that makes us better too. So thank you so much. And I'm grateful, just grateful for every single conversation that we've had.
likewise to you and the Rejuvi team. It's, I continue to feel inspired and like I've got new ideas, including today, every time that we talk. And so I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about something that we both find so exciting and so transformative.
Yeah, agreed. And thank you to everyone who are taking time to build your own modern leadership muscle. That's important. If we want to build uh, um, sustainable, growth-oriented questions, who just so happen to be able to serve the North Star of each and every individual that are within their umbrellas, then we need to move forward with modern leadership. So thank you for watching our recordings, for watching our reels, and for helping us to build this community. We will be back next week, let's see, on Thursday, September 19th, and we are going to be discussing a topic called the Catalyst, and it will be our closing session for volume 3. So thank you for being here today. If you are watching our stuff, the second time that you do it, bring a friend, bring a leader, bring someone else so that we can build that muscle consistently amongst the modern leadership bench. Thank you, everyone.